the reason Fox News and AM radio are singled out by the left is because those are the only two mediums that aren't 100% dominated by far left influencers. So I want to make sure people who are watching this, the young audience, go, corporate media, man, it's still to the left, very far to the left, and I hope people realize that.
Yeah,
it is a problem. It's a problem of intimidating people into silence, and YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, they're all very far left. That's no secret.
For Brian Williams, who's going to keep him accountable? Any of his far left buddies over there at NBC, MSNBC?
Most of our electricity in the United States, a significant portion still comes from coal. You're plugging it in, you're using coal energy. People just don't use, it's a white guilt thing. It's a social justice warrior white guilt. And I'm not saying that someone cannot make a valid argument for climate change. I'm not saying that. Cruz, yeah, he's unliked. He's polarizing because he is the outsider.
It's kind of like Joe Biden did with Shylocks and the Jews.
I about fainted when I heard that.
He didn't even pause. He just kept going right on through like it was just part of the everyday vernacular for Joe Biden.
I think it is.
I think it is. I shouldn't say I don't doubt. I wouldn't doubt Joe Biden being an actual anti-Semite.
Racist, anti-Semitic contents this thread has. I'll have you know I've reported all you evil goyim on 4chan to the ACLU for racism and attempting to start the second Holocaust.
Nationalized health care, up to an 80% tax, gun control, of course, implemented gun control, abortion, was radically pro-abortion, blaming on the 1%. Back then, the 1% were Jews. None of these things are right-wing. None of these things are libertarian or conservative. So let's get through. If you go policy for policy, there's nothing about them that's right-wing or conservative, other than the fact that you're going to try and attribute racism to conservatism because that's what you've been taught to do by your college professor.
Uh-oh, retard alert! Retard alert, class!
Here's the thing. Before I tell you what Jimmy Carter said, or your audience what Jimmy Carter said, it's important to know that people like Jimmy Carter, people like Barack Obama, even people like Ron Paul, they see the United States as the bad guy. They don't really think that we're that shining city on a hill as Ronald Reagan did. So Jimmy Carter said that we're constantly violating human rights. And Jimmy Carter's also the kind of person who basically refers to the United States as an evil empire. And we don't do that. Just like any other country we go into, we liberate the people, we free them from tyrannical leaders, give them back their country, and ask for nothing more than the land with which to bury the dead who died to give them that right.
Or maybe, just maybe, he's illogical in his thought process, and that giving same-sex partnerships the same status as marriage may have more serious repercussions than we thought. Now see, the problem with the liberal secularists' ideal of peace is that it only exists in a world where right and wrong don't. The ultimate goal of the peace movement is to destroy the idea of right and wrong, which is of course the reason that the anti-Christian message has been its fulcrum since the movement's inception.
Release of dozens of thousands of emails with WikiLeaks, it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. For a lot of people, that's hard to navigate, especially because the media doesn't want you to even try. Something to remember with all of the tabloid headlines out there, personal testimony is one of the least reliable forms of evidence in court. One of the most reliable?
Documents. Held evidence.
Which is why WikiLeaks is so important. These are hacked emails, most of which you'll see today come from John Podesta, and he's going to tell you exactly why he doesn't stand by that principle. There's a lot of other media. Half the time I'm going like, what? Are none of you going to fact check this? Why am I the one to do this? The vast majority of white Americans voted for Barack Obama.
Very nice words, but happens to be wrong.
Look at Dylan Roof, who was an atheist, and then he was a Confederate, but then he might have been a liberal.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
The American Nazi Party. And that to me was crazy because they're like, well, we hate Marxists and we hate socialists. But if you read their beliefs, it's just socialism, but it would work with racism. The ice sheets are melting. Truth. The Antarctic ice sheets are actually growing by billions of tons per year.
Yes, that's according to a study by NASA. It says Antarctic ice is growing by 82 billion tons a year. And of course, researchers have a very good idea as to why that's happening. But of course, there are two major ice sheets on Earth. One is Antarctica, the other is Greenland. While Antarctica may be gaining ice to the tune of 82 billion tons a year, Greenland is losing ice to the tune of 269 billion tons a year. In other words, on a global scale, the ice sheets are indeed melting away at the rate of around 187 billion tons a year. That's a net melt of 187 cubic kilometers of ice every year. And if we add in glaciers and sea ice, the net melt is even larger.
So listen, he's right. Premiums have gone up about 22% in 1 year, from 2016 to 2017. Now, when I first read that too, I thought it was low. 22% over 8 states, it went up 30%, but that's 1 year. That's 2016 to 2017. You add that up year over year since the Affordable Care Act has been passed, you have people paying hundreds of percentage points more than they were before. But his solution is Medicare. Medicare for all, which is an entirely broken system. I'll continue to get into that, but a liberal think tank estimated that Bernie Sanders' proposed plan would add $32 trillion in federal spending over the next 10 years. This isn't the Heritage Foundation. This isn't coming from Fox News. This is coming from a leftist think tank. The moral idea of forgiving your enemies, of showing love to your enemies, that is not something that people hold to be intrinsically moral. That is not something that a society could possibly embrace if it weren't a Christian society. But that is a distinctly Christian moral premise. Love your enemies. That is not something that human beings do naturally on their own. So yeah, you do need a kind of a flying spaghetti monster in the sky to tell you that, you know what? Your instinct is to hate your enemies. Your instinct is to seek revenge and vengeance. Justice is right. Serve justice. I'll give you a board plan. I'll give you a blueprint how to serve justice. But do not hate and act in revenge. That's a distinctly Christian idea. It goes against human nature. And they're not the first. Plenty of successful leaders have implemented gun control in the past. Hitler. The United States laws are based on biblical laws, including the First Amendment allowing us to worship freely. This was often confused with the notion that President Jefferson wanted Christian principles kept out of government, which is far from the truth, considering that Jefferson was a man of deep faith himself. And where do you think we learned the fine art of scalping?
But Father, what's that Indian doing?
No, we mustn't say Indians, they're indigenous.
The indigenous, what's that indigenous doing?
Myth. The settlers deliberately infected Native Americans with smallpox blankets to wipe them out. Truth. Only idiots could believe this. And as someone, is raised in socialism, basically in Montreal, I'm screwed because I talked about if Bernie Sanders was president, I said that's the only person who I would potentially revoke my citizenship and flee to Canada because it would go full socialist.
Donald thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real.
I did not.
Oh, come on.
I did not say that.
Oh, come on.
I did not say that.
He never said it's perpetrated by the Chinese. He said a lot of things are perpetrated by the Chinese. The conservatives in Quebec, or conservatives in Canada, would be centrist, and the liberals in Canada are socialist. To give you an idea, where I was raised in Quebec, which is a province, there are only 12 of them in Canada. On CBC, the government-run media. This is mainstream in Canada, okay? The Liberal Party, NDP, sent out flyers where they were going to defend child sex pornography under the guise of art. That was part of their platform, meaning pornography that involved kids, I think, from between the ages to 14 and 16.
This guy will say anything.
I think he's a faker. I think what they did is they found some guy and they go, look, this is we're going to keep this thing rolling, right? Okay,
Yeah.
We like to have the gay bathhouse right above the Vatican. You know, I mean, they own the largest gay bathhouse in Europe. You know that, right? Do you know the whole story behind it?
I don't even want to get the whole story behind it. Let's talk about Islam.
Why are you
I'm not
scared?
Catholic
Than someone who is an atheist?
Yeah. You give him
What do
more
you
of a
mean?
pass than someone who maybe claims to be a Christian. But that's not even the main focus on what I talk about. You know, guns, free
wait,
speech.
I'm saying, okay, I got confused. So you're saying I give atheists more of a pass?
Yeah, you give them more leeway.
Oh.
And my
well,
point
they don't
is,
believe in anything, but I do.
Sure they do. Sure they do. Millions and millions of people killed in the name of atheism. Stalin, Mao.
What's the
cop out? Would you personally vote to legalize drugs? I'm like, in my state, I don't know. Probably not. If you look at the results of Colorado, I probably just wouldn't fill out that voting ticket.
But another thing that we just wrote about, and again, people get mad with the weed
Economics.
issue. Well, no. Traffic fatalities regarding marijuana have skyrocketed.
Since marijuana legalization, highway fatalities in Colorado are at
Hold on a
near
second. You have him
historic
bringing up-
lows.
you have him-
But from the comfort of his show, Bill Maher and his guests are the very definition of bullies, picking on Christians, conservatives, Sarah Palin, and Michelle Bachmann, all under the guise of political incorrectness.
I'm so offended. I don't care if you're offended, you fucking snowflake.
I hope he f***s her angrily because that's how I would. And I've thought about it. I just...
Hey, Count of Monte Cristo, I've got a better idea. Since you leftists believe in hate speech, how about we jail you for it and allow them to angrily have their way with you there? You'll be doling out mustache rides whether you want to or not. That's how you be politically incorrect.
Say you can't joke about something because it's not funny. Comedians run into that shit all the time. Like rape, they'll say, you can't joke about rape. Rape's not funny. I say, fuck you, I think it's hilarious. How do you like that?
If you believe in the modern idea of peace, you might be an idiot. Does violence ever solve problems? Let me know. I would argue that violence is oftentimes the answer.
Not a finger kick!
Seymour wouldn't last 4 seconds with any moderately athletic human being on the planet, Sarah Palin included.
Get out of the frame. You're in the frame. You're in the shot. No, go. Just...
I'm here right now. Why don't you back up?
Back up!
So please, come on, wake up, everybody here. If you can't acknowledge that he's a right-wing social justice warrior and he's the right-wing PC police, you are so immensely biased that it's comical.